You're watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present Chayim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
Hi, I'm Mark Golub, and one of the things we enjoy doing most is introducing you to the array of creative and dynamic men and women who help lead and shape Jewish life today. And so I am thrilled to be able to introduce you to today Marcie Natan, who is the new National President of Hadassah, the Women's Zionist Organization of America. Let me tell you a little bit about Marcie Natan, who has an amazing background of Jewish service throughout her life. Marcie's been an active member in Hadassah for virtually 40 years, has held almost every position imaginable within Hadassah. She's been Hadassah's national treasurer, national secretary, national vice president, as well as having chaired various aspects of Hadassah's work. Marcie has also been involved in many other Jewish and community service activities. She's a past president of Temple Bethel in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She served on the boards of the Lancaster Jewish Community Center and the Lancaster Jewish Federation. She's taught Hebrew school and Sunday school, and she has done myriad other fascinating and wonderful work. And Marcie, it's an honor having you with us. Thank you for joining us.
It's really my pleasure.
Thank you. May I begin simply by finding out a little bit about you?
You
may. I saw that you have been, your family has been involved with Hadassah over the course of 4 generations. Your mother was named Anne. Then your daughter Heidi.
Yes.
And your granddaughter Nina. All of you have been involved in Hadassah. But I want to know, in addition to the fact that it was something your mother did, what first attracted you to become as active and involved in Hadassah as you are now? How did it happen?
I think what we have to do is to say, you have to ask the question a little differently.
Please.
Because believe me, I did not get involved with the intent of this becoming my life.
Yes.
And it has.
You did not intend it to?
Never even crossed my mind. I had was living in Baltimore at the time.
Yes.
My son was, probably about 3 years old.
This is David.
David.
Yes.
And I had a daughter, Nina. My granddaughter, Nina, is the continuation of that name for us. And when she was an infant, I said, I've had it. If I don't do something other than worry about diaper rash and what I'm cooking for dinner. And so I joined a study group that happened to be a Hadassah study group. And I went to a meeting. It was wonderful, a beautiful group of engaged Jewish women, everything I could have hoped for an evening out that would take me away from the daily, I'm not sure I even want to say responsibilities, but give my mind a chance to do something more engaging.
And again, this is in Baltimore.
This is in Baltimore.
The group was led by a woman?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, led by a woman. And when the meeting was over and everybody else left, a couple of what I think I felt at the time were almost stragglers said to me, come sit in the living room for a minute. And they explained to me that they'd love to have me come back. They enjoyed having me that evening, but this was a Hadassah study group. And if I wanted to continue to participate, I would have to join Hadassah. And I believe it was $10 at that time. It was $100 for life membership, so you know I really am going back at a good 40 years. And I joined on the spot. It excited me because it was engaging, connected me to my Judaism, and provided me with a group of women. I think the best way I can say it is like-minded women.
Were you involved in a synagogue at the time?
No.
When you grew up as a young girl, were your parents in a synagogue?
My mother was, my dad, very Jewish and truly the one who instilled in me the very Jewish need to give back, was not. But we went to shul every Shabbat, my siblings and I. It was an Orthodox synagogue, not ultra-Orthodox. We sat on separate sides of the aisle, but there was no mechitza. I remember this, I was still quite young. And we were living at the time in Long Beach, out on Long Island. So I definitely grew up with that in mind.
Okay. As a young mother, you're married to Eli, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you have David, and you had Nina. And now this Hadassah experience excites you. What happens next?
We move. We left Baltimore, moved to Silver Spring, Maryland. We were there for only 2 years. During those 2 years, I was in school full-time at the University of Maryland. And my husband came home one night and actually said to me, maybe a year into this, or just over a year into this, and said, I've taken a job that's taking us to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I said, maybe it's taking you to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I don't leave here until I have my degree, because I have changed schools too many times getting to this point. I was not a Navy wife. My husband worked for the Navy. But you know, somehow it was almost that bad. Every time we turned around, we were living somewhere else. So seriously, he accepted the job, and for the first 6 months, worked staying in the Washington area and cementing the relationships that he was going to need when he made the actual transition to Lancaster. But it was not until we made that move that I became entrenched in Jewish activity. I understood that to be involved Jewishly in a community like Lancaster was going to take more than just knocking on the door of my neighbors' homes and saying, hi, I'm Marcie, and finding out that this was another Jewish couple. And so I immediately reconnected with Hadassah, which I was a life member by then, but I was in school full-time. My daughter, Nina, by then, by the way, I had my third child, Heidi, but my daughter, Nina, was ill, and we were unable to find out exactly what was wrong, and so this was a very consuming part of my life. So full-time student, 3 children, one of them with unique medical needs. Hadassah, which did contact me, but was simply, and I use it now, though, as an example of finding women who are out there and connecting them to Hadassah when it is the right time for them. Because my own life has shown me that it's not for lack of interest sometimes, but simply the place one is in one's life.
That's a very important insight.
So here we were in Lancaster, and I joined the JCC, and I joined I reconnected with Hadassah. I joined the sisterhood. We joined a synagogue. We bar mitzvahed our son. And by the time I turned around, I was totally enmeshed. I don't know how else to say it.
When is the first time you traveled to Israel, and what was that like for you?
1970.
What brought you there?
My in-laws, my husband's family, are Iraqi Jews who were, by the time he came along already, making that transition to Iran, and lived a wonderful life in Iran under the Shah. And in 1970, I alone took my 3 children and went to visit my in-laws. David was about 5. Heidi was 6 months, or maybe David was a little more than 5. There's 5 years between them. And the 3 kids and I went to Iran. Eli did not join me, but then met me in Israel at the end of the trip.
Wow.
So I flew to Israel for the first time, not from the States, but from Iran. It's a very short flight. And I had a window seat, and I watched the landscape go from, of course, the city, Tehran, that we left from, but then flying over the desert, and all of a sudden, I looked down, and it was as if a child had drawn with crayons. So we went from the sand of the desert to the green, and I understood that I was looking at Israel. And the impact that in 1970 the Jewish people had had on the land, greening the land. And that was my first trip to Israel, very short. I think we were there maybe 3 days at the end of this summer in
Did that
in Iran.
trip touch you at all?
I wanted to stay.
Really?
Oh, very, really. I said, look, we're here, we have the kids. We'll just make aliyah. They will be Israelis. We'll always be, I'll always be an American that made aliyah. I'm not sure what Eli would have been. He looked at me that, kind of midway through those 3 days, and he said, I think we're going to have to go back. I'm not sure how we buy an apartment here, and I'm not sure how we make a living, but I make us a promise. We come back.
Did he keep his promise?
Oh, he's kept his promise royally.
How many times have you been to Israel now?
I'm at over 45 and counting.
Wow.
So.
You begin, this is 1970, but we should remind everyone, this is 3 years after the Six-Day War.
Yes.
It is 3 years before the Yom Kippur War.
Yes.
In many ways, this was the headiest time that Israel had in terms of its dealings with the Arab world. And all of Jewish life was in an explosion of celebration over the state of Israel. So you went at a wonderful, wonderful time. But you've been back so many times, you've seen the evolution. And I wish you'd tell me, again, you pick 1 or 2 other visits that you feel were in some way, that they touched you in some way and helped shape who you became as a Jew who ultimately has devoted so much of herself to Hadassah and now is national president.
I went again in 1984 on a Young Leaders Mission. That was my next trip. From 1970 until 1984, I was in the States and raising my family and dreaming about going. But financially, it was truly not realistic to consider.
Do you become involved in Hadassah locally?
I'm very involved in Hadassah locally, but one can be an engaged, active, devoted member of Hadassah without being in Israel.
Yes.
But in 1984, I went on a Young Leaders Mission, and that was most amazing. Again, at a very fortuitous time to be in Israel. We were up on the, we went up to the Good Fence. You traveled everywhere, feeling very secure and very comfortable. And it was a wonderful trip with other, again, like-minded women and a few couples. And I've been numerous times, obviously, since then, but the other truly shaping trip was when I went during the Gulf War.
You did?
We, Hadassah, took a mission during the Gulf War. And my son, who counseled my family, said first to my husband, Dad, she's determined that she's going, but don't worry. Tell her it's okay. You want to go with Hadassah? Go. He said, if war actually breaks out and the Scuds are flying, the ladies of Hadassah will not go to Israel. And when we went, he made his first contribution to Hadassah. I think he understood for the first time that what I was doing was more than for him a way to keep his mother out of his hair.
It was a real commitment on your part.
That this was a very serious responsibility that the organization had and relationship with Israel, that the president of Israel asked that Hadassah come in the middle of the war and met with us.
Yes, I give you enormous credit. Can you remember one moment of that trip for us?
Oh, yes. We landed. This is a night of 40 women traveling on one plane, and by the way, we're not allowed to do that now. We had the past presidents, the sitting president, the incoming president, the treasurer, the national secretary, and members of the national board on one plane. Not smart. But we landed a little giddy, but we landed, and they immediately shepherded us onto a bus with windows that were reinforced. And the director general stood in front of us, and we're giggly. I mean, really, none of us slept on that trip over. We were coming out of 2 days of national board meetings, which we held in our New York offices, and then a group of us who chose to make the trip got on the plane. And they gave us our boxes with our gas masks, and they said to us, lose your purse, but don't lose the gas mask. And now I want you to open the box, and we're going to teach you how to properly wear those gas masks. Yeah, these are Hadassah ladies. What about my hair? So forget the hair. You need to be able to wear the mask and wear it properly. And one of our women wears a wig. No, she does not wear.
It's a wig. Okay. It's not for Orthodox purposes.
Out of need, but not for religious purposes. And I remember there was a whole discussion about, do I put it on over the wig? Do I have to take off the wig? And then they said, all right, now look in the box and take out what's still in there, which was a vial of atropine.
Oh, my.
And one of the women raises her hands and says, we've been reading in the newspapers that a few elderly folks have inadvertently given themselves the atropine shot, even though they truly were not exposed to any sort of gases, and that they were then violently ill. So how will we know if we've really been exposed?
And need it as an antidote.
And need it as an antidote. And the Director General, and at this point, this busload of people suddenly, it hit us. He said, fluids will start pouring out of every hole in your body.
If you're infected.
Yes, if
Yes.
you've been exposed to the, how will you know if you,
Yes,
this is how you'll know.
You'll know.
And I remember thinking, we're here voluntarily.
But you weren't sorry.
To say that when I'm in Israel, I always need to make a phone call. And I've never been comfortable doing it, because you pick up the phone in the hotel and you get the operator and you say, this is the phone number. And you actually could hear the disdain because you spoke only English. And on that trip, I picked up the phone, and to this day I get tears in my eyes when I remember it. And it's like, here we go again. And the operator heard my voice, and instead of the usual kind of, she started to say, thank you. Thank you for being here with us. And it was truly an operator. I'll never know who she was, but it was a life-changing experience, and it was the beginning of a very different relationship between the Israelis and the American Jews. I truly believe that up until that time, there was almost a, big deal. You come, you give us your money, you leave. Why didn't you make Aliyah? And now, for the first time, there was the beginning of a very unique and different relationship, and an understanding that we need the Israelis, and they need us. And there is a role for an American Jew who is a true Zionist, who feels a deep, all-consuming need to be connected with Israel, but for whatever the reasons are, is not about to make Aliyah.
And that describes you in a part.
And that very much...
You feel enormously connected now to Israel, don't you?
I do.
And the fact that you live in America says nothing about the extent of your emotional tie to the state of Israel.
Hadassah, by definition, has always felt, has created its own mission and motto. The motto, Aruchat Bat Ami, the healing of the daughter of my people. I have always viewed as healing for me is far more than, you're lying in a hospital bed and now you feel better. It is truly how do I make the life, and how does an individual in need connect with me in a way that will be healing and beneficial, actually, for both of us. Mm-hmm. So whether we heal through Hadassah Medical Organization, our two hospitals, and the research and the health care, or through Youth Aliyah, which brought children out of Germany and literally gave them an opportunity for survival and to become a part of that next generation of that first generation, actually, of real, Israelis, whether it is through our Hadassah College Jerusalem, where we have so many students for whom the opportunity to go to college that we provided, they are the first generation of, whether it's Ethiopians or Russians or native Israelis, to complete a university study program. Mm-hmm. So all of these, in their way, provide that healing. For us, who we are as Jews is so intertwined with the successful existence of a Jewish state. Our ability to be on the cusp and a part of both the formation of that country and meeting the needs of that country, and therefore it's coming back to the American Jew and saying, you are whether it is a fulfilled Jew or a Jew who's taken more than the education that we get or the synagogue connection that we have, and brought us as brothers and sisters together with our Israeli counterparts and brothers and sisters, mm-hmm. and what they have given us by giving us an opportunity to be connected as Jews with a practical, true, it goes so far beyond that esoteric, I am a Jew and I know my Torah and I even perhaps speak some Hebrew, and said I'm on the ground. If the state of Israel is green, it's green because we've helped to make it green. If the state of Israel is high-tech and state-of-the-art and has come out with some of the most incredible medical research, it's because we've been there. It's us and it's them. And this morning I had breakfast with the incoming Director General of our Hadassah hospitals. And what he said to me is, when our doctors come to the States and they meet the Hadassah, the women of Hadassah, it's almost as if who we are as Jews comes beyond, we're Jews. We're Jews, we're Israelis, we've been in the army, the whole gestalt. And yet, it's when we come and we meet you and we see the intensity with which you connect with Israel and the type of Judaism that you bring to many of us who are very secular Jews, that the full circle is completed.
That is one of the best definitions of the connection of American Jews to Israel I have ever heard. Thank you for that. That was wonderful. I want to, if you don't mind, I want to digress with an asterisk. And you can decide how you want to answer this. It's because you've mentioned it. I don't want it to be left unaddressed. What happened to your daughter?
We were
We're
never...
talking about Nina.
Nina.
Yes.
Kind of, my Nina, and now we have our Nina.
Right. Nina was your second child?
Nina was our middle child.
What happened to her?
We don't know. And yet, I say, and I said it actually as part of my installation acceptance speech, if you will, I truly believe that the research that we are doing at Hadassah today would have allowed us perhaps not to have resolved what her problem was, but at least to have understood it. She had, she would run these very high fevers. She had terrible pain in her abdomen and the stomach. We took her all over the country. We actually did send her records at the time to Hadassah, thinking that perhaps it was some sort of a genetic disease, my husband being Sephardic, I am Ashkenazic, and we never knew. Ultimately, we did allow the doctors to do an autopsy, in truth, because I had 2 other children. And if we could find out anything that would have allowed us to have a better understanding, we and our rabbi felt that it would be appropriate.
Absolutely. How old
we don't
was she?
know. She was 21.
Personality-wise, was she okay?
Oh, when she was well, you and I together could not have kept up with her. She was a university scholar student at Penn State University. A just, lovely, bright, kind of burn the candle at both ends kid who once said to her physician, Dr. T, you and I both know that when I am sick, I am far too sick to be able to try and process how to move forward with my situation. And when I am well, if you think I am wasting my time, my good, treasured time, trying to analyze, how am I dealing with this? You must be kidding. About as well balanced a person as one could hope for. And we had ultimately found a medication that would bring her out of very prolonged attacks. But it was an anti-immune medication. Mm-hmm. And she took sick. We started her on the medication. Obviously, she either came in with something in her system or picked something up while she was in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And because this medication was given right into her bloodstream, we were not able to, her body just would not fight it and literally shut down.
So first of all, I'm so sorry. And I can't imagine how parents deal with this, how a mommy deals with this. I'm really sorry. How did you deal with it? I'm not sure that I did. I am sure that on some level for many years, there were 14 years from the time she took sick until the time she died, with, as I say, these periods where she was fine and periods where she was sick. And I remember that when we were making her bat mitzvah, and she wanted a dinner dance party, and this was simply not the way we had handled our sons, nor what we had originally anticipated for her. And I remember saying to Eli, we're never going to make her a wedding. We are going to do this. And he was quite angry with me. What do you mean we're not going to make her a wedding? Of course we're going to make her a wedding. And I said, Eli, open your
eyes. How many years of the type of battle that she is going through can be expected? I think I mourned her death many years before she died. And it gave me the strength when we did lose her to be the one to be there for the rest of my family. Mm-hmm. And I had Hadassah. I had a type of work and responsibility that was so important and meaningful for the good of others that I was able to focus on that. I couldn't read a book, couldn't go to a movie, I couldn't get my nails done, you know, I couldn't go bowling. I mean, none of what had been so much a part of my life up until then. But whatever I had to do for Hadassah, I could do, because it came with that other level of doing for others. I, to this day, am not certain what total toll it took for our other two children. I know that for a full 3 years after she died, I had a husband, but he was simply a shell after all. As a father, he was to protect his children, and he had not totally succeeded. And then literally, I watched him come out of it, and I had him back. And this has been just a gift to me for all of the years since then. And I think that he understood that for those years, I was there for him. And he has been saying thank you in the most remarkable and important ways since then, as just, you know, he says, I need my chauffeur's hat, I need my, I've truly, truly been blessed.
Two questions having to do with what I believe are some of the problems facing anyone who is the head of a major national organization in America. Number one, Hadassah is a volunteer organization. At one point in time, Marcie, our generation grew up and understood that volunteerism was noble. Also, women at one point had different kinds of availability of time. We now live in an age where almost every household is a two-income household, where women have so much responsibility just to keep their family afloat that sometimes they don't have time to volunteer for this organization or that one. I want to know how you have experienced this problem within Hadassah. To what extent is it difficult for you now, for Hadassah now, to attract younger women who would have been your equivalent back in the 1970s and before, when you first became involved in Hadassah?
It's an interesting question, and for us, there's almost two pieces of it. One is, how do we bring them in and have them become members of Hadassah? And the other is, how do we deal with the fact that the volunteer workforce that once was, you know, almost a non-issue for us, and today is the time limits on women out there today has truly affected our ability to count on their volunteer time to keep chapters and groups doing what they had done in years past. So let me take the one first. This year, for our, this is our going into our centennial year, and I have to tell you, I pinch myself that I will be the national president of Hadassah when we celebrate our centennial. You know, it's almost like the stars just lined up perfectly, and it is an extraordinary time. But in recognition and in honor of that, we did a special. We said anyone that joins Hadassah during this year as a life member will get that life membership for $100. And we have had over 30,000 women.
Oh, wow.
And some men. This is a total of our new life members and associate members. Over 30,000 have joined us in this year.
How wonderful.
The numbers are there. The desire to be able to say, I am connected to an organization that is intimately involved in practical Zionist work with Israel, that does good works here in this country as well, that is involved in advocacy, that is involved in Jewish education. That's there. Finding the women on a local level who are going to keep these groups doing the types of activities that they've done in the years past, to cook the meals, come into the synagogue and prepare the meals and plan the programming. That is a challenge for us. And so many of the units across the country have either over the years resorted to at least part-time professional assistants, or cut back on the number of meetings that they have, so they're not meeting as regularly. Or if they do have those meetings, find that, and I hear this all the time, oh, we used to have a donor luncheon and 500 women came, and today we're happy if we get 250 or 300, because whether you do that dinner in the evening, so you say, okay, it's after work, but you know what? And I understand only too well. After work, I'm tired. I really don't want to have to go out again. If you do it during the day, you lose a very significant part of the membership because they're working women and they're at work. So this is an issue for us. But it's an ongoing challenge, one I hope we will be meeting more successfully by increasing our ability to really get into the social media realm. I look at my daughter, when she was home with that beautiful granddaughter of mine, and she'd be colicky or whatever. And if we were visiting, I would, hear, and so I'd get up and I'd see there's my daughter on the computer talking to other women who, like her, are home dealing with she would Google them up or whatever it was she would do, and there they would be commiserating with each other at 2 or 3 in the morning. It's a world obviously very different from our world, but very much a part of who today's young woman is. And we, Hadassah, need to better manage to become a part of their conversation through this social media. So we're working on that.
Do you worry at all for the future of Hadassah?
Every consultant that we have worked with over the last year has said maybe we need to face the fact that Hadassah, the Women's Zionist Organization of America, should think about the placement of the Z word.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we want to attract the today's modern young woman. Today's woman is, for the most part, very willing to have a connection with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Hadassah as the organization that will provide her with an opportunity to touch and feel the land of Israel. But without that.
Oh, yes, let's make
C
sure we
word.
understand what you're suggesting, I believe. There seems to be, by the way, it's still, I have a hard time getting my mind around it. I only know it's true. That some people are uncomfortable with the word Zionism.
Yes.
And that there are articles now being written about the extent to which young people have a difficult time equating liberal with Zionist. And that young liberals seem to be less enamored with Israel as a bastion of liberalism itself, although Israel is, first of all, one of the most liberal countries in the entire world, and certainly more liberal than anything in the Middle East. But you and I understand that at the moment, Zionism is getting a bad rap as a concept. And what you're touching on, and I want to make sure everybody understands it, what you're touching on is, some people have said to you, we have to present Zionism without emphasizing the Zionist element, even though, Marcie, that is at the heart of what Hadassah has always been. So I'm asking you now to speak to this broader problem that faces American Jewish life in terms of young people. And when you look at your children's friends, and when you look in general at the American scene, and this hideous attempt now to delegitimize the state of Israel through the BDS movement and all kinds of attempts to brand Israel as some kind of fascist, Nazi, apartheid, oppressive state, how would you say, not about Hadassah, but what would you want us to do, those of us who see Israel very differently? I believe we see Israel realistically, love what Israel has done, what Israel is capable of, and we want to show that to young people and the liberals of all ages. So I'm asking you, Marcie, now to talk about this in a larger context, not simply about Hadassah. How do you answer this for your friends and yourself and your husband when you're just confronting this on a day-to-day basis yourself?
First of all, I think, although I'm sorry Birthright is such a short trip, but I think bringing young people to Israel is critically important. I would say that every family today that is raising children, and if they're able to see that they have a Jewish camping experience, I think that's phenomenal. But ultimately, they need to get these children to Israel. Let them go, let them see, let them touch the land and talk to the people. Let them see the warts. Nobody today should be trying to pass Israel off as the perfect state. We make mistakes here, they make mistakes there. But with all the mistakes here and there, and I'll say it for both, what country could hold a candle to the United States of America? What country with a history of, how many years old are they now?
63 as we tape today.
3? Okay, so a 63-year-old country that can compete in terms of a high-tech nation in Tel Aviv, a city that has everything that every modern city could ask, and you come up the street and IBM and Siemens and I mean whatever it is that you would expect to see here, all of the banking and the internet companies and the high tech, everything is there. Sophisticated designers, whatever it is that you're looking for, research that is coming out of the state of Israel that is world renowned and changing the future of the world, not of their country, not of this country, of the world as we speak. A country that is prepared to send people, their medical teams, into tsunami affected areas or everywhere that I've ever gone. I was in India and they took us to a farm, and they're very proudly showing us the irrigation system. I take one look at the irrigation system. I know this irrigation system. Where did you get it from? From Israel. So that's the beauty that they have to see, is the relationship and the situation between the Jews and the Arabs and the Jews and the Jews in Israel perfect? No. Far from it. But it's a real country with real people, and this too is a part of the reality on the ground. And yes, we have to work on it. Let's take our wonderful minds and let them help to do it. Let's take these kids and let them see it, and then let them come back and sit together and argue and try and come up with the ways that they can then go onto their campuses or into their homes and be able to speak intellectually and factually. And I think that we will be able to keep that very strong commitment. Mm-hmm. The problem that we have is in a word, and it's a word that started off with a very fine reputation, if you will, and is now equated with Zionism is racism and delegitimization. And I look at Hadassah, and here I bring it back to Hadassah, and I say, if there is any organization in the world that has a fighting chance of bringing back the glow to the word Zionism, it is Hadassah.
I agree with you.
And I would hope that we will, rather than trying to erase it, try to reinvigorate it with all of the beauty that was originally attached to it.
That is so beautifully said, and you will do that. Marcie Natan, you will do that.
I will try to do that.
One more quick question for you. I was just in Israel, and a number of times I was up on Mount Scopus. And of course, Hadassah Hospital is on Mount Scopus. Marcie, it's been in the news lately because suddenly there seems to be, I'm not sure that it's correct to say attacks, but there has been some kind of disturbances, even many violence, that are making some of the people who work at Hadassah Hospital uncomfortable. What can you tell us about it, and what do you think we can do about it?
Hadassah Hospital on Mount Scopus sits on a hill overlooking the Arab village of Issawiyah. Mm-hmm. And the residents of Issawiyah refer to Hadassah Hospital as Little Hadassah. It's their hospital. And you go into that hospital, and it truly is, it's an amazing experience, because you see everything from the ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jew sitting there, and the Arab in full, the women fully covered, and then the very modern, the soldiers and the modern Israelis, and
each,
foreigners
each
as
is
well.
taken care of equally.
Yes.
There is no distinction made. Okay.
Truly.
And also I want to clarify one more
And
thing.
the staff in that hospital are Arab doctors, Arab nurses, Israelis, Russians, and Ethiopians.
Right.
I mean, we are
It is a marvelous melange, isn't it?
But there is, and it is a fact, as it is in the rest of Israel, that a group, and I would never disparage the general population of Issawiyah, but either among that population or now embedded in that population are those who are a part of a movement to try and keep some level of attack going. We saw an increase in the number of Molotov cocktails and things on, I think it's March 4th, May 4th.
Well, on the day they commemorate the Nakba,
yes,
there were more attacks on Hadassah Hospital than in the past. And the real question is, to what extent...
But they've been happening since
yes,
then.
and that they have not ceased. And so the question is, to what extent do you feel, or are you told from people who are there, that this is a problem which in any way could threaten either the functioning or the actual operation of Hadassah Hospital on Mount Scopus? And I just want to clarify for anybody who does not understand. There are now two major centers of Hadassah in Israel. Mount Scopus is the older one, which Hadassah continues to run, and then there's a modern Hadassah center in Jerusalem itself. But the one on Mount Scopus is the one that has come under attack. Does it pose any threat at the moment, are you told, for either the operation or the continuing keeping it open on Mount Scopus?
We are aware of it. It is affecting, we've had to increase security at that hospital specifically because of those attacks. I believe that there needs to be some conversation, probably with the government about how best to protect that hospital and make sure that it can continue to function effectively on a daily basis. In my mind, closing that hospital and the message that that would send would be so hurtful to the state of Israel that I would not want to even have to contemplate it. And although it is the older of our two hospitals, it's the first hospital that we built.
That's great.
That hospital was lost to us following the War of Independence and until after the
Six-Day War,
the 67 war, and we meanwhile had opened our hospital at Ein Kerem, and it was because the government of Israel said to us when they gave us back the keys, we need you to reopen this hospital because we need a community hospital in this area. And so we did. We maintain now two fully functional, although our tertiary care, our Center for Emergency Medicine, our Mother and Child, our Charette Institute of Oncology are all at Ein Kerem. The hospital on Mount Scopus does have our neonatal intensive care and our rehabilitation center are both based there. And it is as well a fully functioning community hospital.
Doesn't it make you proud, the contribution Hadassah Hospital, and I'm now using it in the broader sense, I don't care about which facility we're talking about. Hadassah Hospital has made a continuing contribution to Jewish life and the state of Israel for as long as these buildings have operated prior to the establishment of the State of Israel. And as we kind of wrap this up, in some way, that's the message I want you to sort of leave us with. If there are people watching right now, young or older, who may not be a part of Hadassah, and you have Hadassah Associates for Men, what's the one message you'd like to leave us with that ties into the contribution Hadassah Hospital has made in the State of Israel and the contribution Hadassah as an organization has made to Jewish life for 100 years?
Hadassah Hospital is the result of Hadassah coming into a pre-state in 1913 with 2 nurses, seeing what the medical needs were, and beginning then to develop what has become a modern healthcare system for the state. So I look at it, and my pride extends far beyond our 2 hospitals. I look at the entire medical, the cadre of hospitals across the country, and the fact that this is a modern country with modern medical care, and I say, look what Hadassah has done for the State of Israel. But then I look at JNF and the greening and the clearing of the swamps, and I say, Hadassah was there. I look at Youth Aliyah and the college, and I say, if it wasn't for Hadassah, we are the only college in the center of Jerusalem. We're in the heart of Jerusalem with a now 4-year accredited university, and it's more than something to bring pride. I look here at the opportunities for American Jewish women across the country to be connected with an organization that allows them to be a part of everything Hadassah has done in Israel, and to have a chavara, a friendship, a group of other Jewish women who care about their Judaism, who want to study, who want to advocate here in this country, who want to be sure that our government understands the importance of the State of Israel in its relationship with the world, and most certainly in the Middle East. And all of this is happening through Hadassah. So I, believe me, get much more than I give.
You are remarkable. You know, I was so happy that I was going to meet the new president of Hadassah. But it's much more wonderful to meet Marcie Natan. You are out of this world. Marcie, tell our audience, who's Henrietta Zold?
The founder of Hadassah.
The founder in 1912.
1912.
1912. The first president of Hadassah. And
yes.
now you will be the president.
25th.
You'll be the 25th president who will be at the reins, at the leadership of Hadassah for its 100th anniversary. So from Henrietta Zold to Marcie Natan, a series of extraordinary women have led Hadassah. But how lucky Hadassah is to have you as the centennial president. You will always be welcome here. May you go from strength to strength, and I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha, only good success, both in your personal life and your professional life. And I do not doubt for one moment that Hadassah will thrive under your leadership. And again, I only hope you will turn to Shalom TV anytime we can help you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so very, very much. You are wonderful.
Thank you.
And that was my meeting with Marcie Natan, the new national president of Hadassah. We hope you enjoyed meeting her, getting to know her. Again, a most lovely and unusual human being. And I hope that you've been touched by her as I have. As always, I'd love to know your reactions to some of the things Marcie has had to say. Please be in touch with me this week by mail or by email, or post on Shalom TV's Facebook wall, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. And if you'd like to be in touch with Marcie directly, you may email me, and I'll forward your emails on to her. And so until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $36 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Tax-deductible checks may be made out to GEM and mailed to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.